Hi, I'm Steve Gompertz of QRx Partners, and welcome to this week's Quality Heretic. I'm going to talk about terminology again, and another phrase out of the standards that I see that gets misinterpreted a lot, and that is the phrase without undue delay. That occurs in both the 9001 and the 1345 standard. In 9001, you will find it in the section on internal audit, where there is this statement about taking appropriate corrective actions without undue delay. Right? Similarly, in 1345, it shows up in two places, both in the internal audit section and in the corrective action section. Obviously, those things are definitely related. And similar language, corrective actions are taken without undue delay. Okay, great. So what does that mean exactly? And the problem is, I see this way too often that people interpret it to mean they're telling us we got to get it done right now. Okay. And the reality is that's not at all what they're saying. It's not to be interpreted as do it right away. They're saying you need to figure out what's correct, right? So that it's not undue. And if it's simple, get it done. If it's complex, take the appropriate amount of time. Don't inflate it, right? It's figure out what's at stake, right? And hopefully you're guessing where I'm going to go with this, right? So how do you know what constitutes without undue delay? And hopefully it should be no shock. It's about risk-based approach, right? It's a risk-based decision. That's how you figure out what represents an acceptable amount of time. But what I see too often in both internal audit procedures and in CAPA procedures is this setting of hard deadlines that a CAPA must be closed within a certain number of weeks, or that they phase out the elements, right, of CAPA, and each one's got a deadline, right? You've got to get investigation done in a week, and then you got to get planning done in another week, and then you've got to execute to that plan within 3 or 4 weeks, right? And they set these hard deadlines, and you're trying to create a one size fits all approach to something that cannot have a one size to it, right? Every non-conformance situation you're addressing through your CAPA process is going to be different, and the solutions are going to be different. The amount of time it takes to investigate is going to be different, right? The root causes are going to dictate how much effort it's going to take, right? And then you can figure out what represents getting this done without undue delay. Um, some of my tips for this would be if it can be done right away, yes, get it done right away, right? Don't sit on it, right? They expect to see that, hey, if this is a solution that can be implemented really quickly, please get it done. Absolutely. However, if it's something that's going to take more time, let's say like you realize, all right, we've been doing everything on paper. It's time we put in a EQMS. All right. And you go, all right, but well, first we got to get the budget approved, and the budget process doesn't begin for another 4 months. And then we got to get into it. We got to pick a vendor. We got to get the system set up. We have to do validation, right? We have to train people. We're looking at a year. Okay. That doesn't mean it's the wrong solution, right? Even though I get it, that sounds like a delay, an undue delay. You're saying, no, that's the appropriate solution, right? To address the root causes, we have to, right? We have a systemic problem. We have to address it systemically, and that's going to take a while. But that doesn't mean you're off the hook and you don't do anything until a year from now. You should also be including, so what are we going to do in terms of mitigation in the interim, right? That will indicate that you are not, taking an undue delay. You are saying, well, initially we can do this, right? We have some temporary measures we can put in place, but ultimately we're trying to get to this, final solution, and that will take time. That's totally acceptable, and no auditor, no regulatory body is going to ping you and say that was an undue delay, right? If you show them there was a pathway and you were taking the steps along the way to maintain control based on the amount of risks involved. Okay? And then the last tip is what I already talked about. Do not let timelines dictate your solutions. Again, you are trying to address a root cause in the case of corrective action, right? To prevent recurrence of the NC that has already occurred. And in preventive action, you have a potential NC and you're trying to make sure it can't occur in the first place. But you never want to constrain those based on some arbitrary deadline that is going to mean you don't get the optimal solution. You just get a solution. And that's the problem of misinterpreting the undue delay requirement. So again, it doesn't mean you have to rush. It just means you have to consider the risks and figure out what is an appropriate timeline for this. As always, I hope to see some really good comments on this. Love for you to share your experiences. Have you worked in organizations on both sides that have either tried to constrain the process or those who have put no constraints? Because you can set certain guidelines based on the risks. You can go right in there and say things like, this was a critical risk event, right? We need to start the investigation within the next 24 hours and report back within the first 3 days. Doesn't mean you've solved it or figured it out, but those are the kind of things you need to do. And you're demonstrating that you're trying to avoid undue delays by managing the process and having the appropriate controls in place. Anyway, be great to see some comments on this. Otherwise, I'll see you next week on the Quality Heretic.